All right, so today we're going to talk about implementing UX strategy within startups. So, first things first, let's talk about the user experience role within the growing workplace. So, obviously, as you know, UX and product design input become much more essential to a company's digital growth. Adopting a proper design and implementation early in their development process and roadmap has definitely become a very crucial element to aid their online experience. Now, there's no doubt that hiring and implementing a design team can introduce a variety of costly and timely obstacles. But within this paper and throughout the rest of the research and this presentation, there are indeed numerous UX strategies and approaches that startups specifically can adopt so that they're able to ensure that the early stages of delivering a product meet those fast and iterative and cost effective factors. So, Laura Hakanen basically introduces this framework called the Minimum Viable UX Framework. And basically, this whole framework aims to provide users with an adequate user experience early in the MVP stage of the product. So she breaks down her paper by talking about a study that she conducted from a set of interviews based on entrepreneurs from 12 startups. Now, this study was broken up into two phases. One was 13 entrepreneur interviews, and the other four were interviews with UX expertise to evaluate the framework. So the interview was based on a set of questions that encompassed these types of questions, such as how do startups start UX design, what practices are beneficial at a given stage, and what are the essential end goals that need to be fulfilled. So basically, the study covered which UX elements were absolutely necessary in developing a product and which ones could ultimately be omitted. So here she breaks down the four main elements of the framework: attractiveness, approachability, professionalism, and selling the idea. So throughout the study and interviews, selling the idea proved to be the main aim of the framework. Now, this offers the startup a possibility to receive feedback from users who actually understand the idea and the need of the product. And this allows them to be able to find out early if this is a product that users will actually use and are ready to use. Now, the other three are just as important, but they basically create the foundation for selling the idea. So, obviously, the other three being attractiveness, approachability, and professionalism. So, obviously, first impression of the product is influenced by making the early product version attractive towards its potential users before they even touch it. And obviously, providing professional image along with the approachable ease of use, the product is able to obtain a reputable identity to shed light on the startup's product and kind of get their name out there and create a kind of unique identity. So within Laura Klein's paper, she talks about the UX for lean startups. And this basically talks about the implementation of the lean methodology, specifically designed and curated for startups and smaller companies that have those limited resources, such as budgeting and staffing. So she brings up this main quote right here that basically says, instead of thinking of a product as a series of features to be built, lean UX looks at a product as a set of hypotheses to be validated. And this is very important because designers should not assume that they know what the users want. You know, we are not the users; we're designers. And basically, this was done by customer interviews and research that are heavily conducted to ensure that they understand what the customer actually wants and what they actually need. And by doing this process, this omits a lot of wasted time for generating potentially useless features that the users may not need. So she provides this option of Webvan, which is a online grocery delivery service. And basically, she kind of talks about how Webvan did not necessarily use this approach, and this is basically what kind of caused them to suffer when they were starting. So they did not do any sort of user research. They didn't do any sort of interviews and basically talk to their upcoming customer clientele. So when they started, the company literally spent around $400 million on an automated warehouse system to prepare for the launch. Now, although the idea seems, it seems cool, it seems practical on paper, they soon realized that people were actually not simply ready to shop for groceries online. And given that they spent all that money on a warehouse and a system that didn't meet those criteria, they lost quite a bit of traction. Now, if Webam were to, first break it down into smaller bits and experiment with, such as like a static website, maybe a limited range of products and a concierge service, they could have potentially saved money to survive until people were actually ready to shop online for their groceries and until that kind of experience became more popular. So within Lydia Borisova's How Startups Should Evaluate Their Products UX, this looks more towards how people and designers can actually look at their product using basically a set of different evaluation methods. So within this paper, she conducted 5 UX evaluation methods, and those included a heuristic evaluation, cognitive walkthrough, a tree testing, and the system usability scale, while brainstorming through theoretical and empirical analysis. And basically, each of these evaluation methods were conducted on a startup called Sopia, which is a beauty store, basically during their MVP stage. So I'm only going to talk about 3 of those, just because those 3 seem to be the most practical and useful for startups. Well, actually, one of them being actually a RON method to use. So we'll talk about that later. But basically, Borisova first uses a heuristic evaluation, and obviously a heuristic evaluation is used to check an interface for the system and attempt to define if the design is essentially just good or bad based on the standard guided principles. She describes this to be a very cheap, fast, and easy to use method, perfect for a startup with limited resources. And it offers great insight to basically target the pinpoint of a product's potential value immediately and right away. So using this, they were able to identify some usability mistakes, inconsistency of design aesthetic standards such as colors and type fonts, as well as evaluate the flexibility and efficiency of use errors. And evidently, the method proved to be a cost-effective process of cleaning up, of basically cleaning up their first MVP stage of the product. The next one she talks about is the cognitive walkthrough. So basically, this walkthrough is essential for gathering any sort of qualitative or quantitative results. It basically allows participants to kind of walk through an early kind of flow and process of how they may use the product when it is launched. Now, the main limitation of this is finding those appropriate users to test. This test focuses heavily on locating and finding the right participants that kind of fit the perceived persona and profile of the product's target users. So sure, finding the right participants can be difficult, but if the startup has those sources, it can definitely ensure a smooth usability within the product's flow during testing. Now, the one that didn't work was basically the system usability scale. So this method it's basically a quick and dirty survey scale that enables the usability practitioners to quickly and easily evaluate the usability of a given system. So the scale is composed of 10 questions with 5 response questions, and the method was found to be impractical for the startup's progress. This is due to the scale being difficult for novice UX practitioners to understand. Again, we're talking about startups. They may not have really senior UX designers, and definitely any sort of beginner in the UX field, it's hard to understand the aim of the tool and the scoring system to interpretate the results. So obviously the scale, it takes time to learn and understand. And again, for a startup that doesn't have that kind of time and resources, it doesn't really seem practical. And obviously that extra time can be allocated to a different practice. So she cites that the team, during their testing of the Sopia MVP, they didn't have time to learn the system for testing. And in addition, the scale basically only provides the team with a general score. It's essentially a Likert scale of what they like and what they dislike. Now, this is great and all, but it doesn't necessarily point out the specific usability problems to actually address. It doesn't exactly address the why. So, in conclusion, UX strategy and design input is obviously essential to any young company. Although it is an added effort to implement UX and design input into a company's product, it can still easily be done and should be done by targeting and implementing the correct methodologies just to omit any sort of wasted time, any sort of limited resources. So obviously from the findings, there are numerous developed frameworks and methods that exist that allow a startup to implement strong design. And these methodologies and frameworks basically help a startup create a product in a quick, efficient, and cost-effective manner to launch a robust product with ease. Thank you.